Ma'am, I have an eviction order for this address. Your parents filed it behind your back. He said that at 6 in the morning on my front porch. 2 weeks later, those same parents went pale and couldn't say a word. As always, before we dive into a story with an ending that's going to feel really satisfying for you, let's do a quick roll call. Type present and the city you're watching from in the comments. For everyone who has liked and subscribed, I pray that Allah makes your problems easier, widens your provision, and keeps your body healthy. Thank you, my friends. Now, listen carefully to my story. My name is Lauren, and until a few months ago I honestly believed I was a pretty lucky daughter. I grew up in a small town, in a modest house with a front yard that my mom filled with roses and my dad filled with rules. I was the responsible one, the eldest, the kid who brought home good grades and didn't get into trouble. My younger brother Tyler was the wild one, the funny one, the one everyone immediately liked. I was the one my parents leaned on when they needed something done. When my grandparents on my dad's side passed away a few years ago, they left behind a little bungalow in a nice, quiet neighborhood just outside the city. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it had a big maple tree in the front yard and a sunroom in the back that soaked up the afternoon light. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "We decided that house should be yours, Lauren. You're the one we can count on to take care of it." I cried from happiness. I spent nights scrolling through decor ideas, imagining my future kids playing under that maple tree. When I finally moved into the bungalow, I felt like my life was finally starting. I got a job as an assistant at a small marketing firm, and after a while I met Alex, a graphic designer who worked on the same floor. He was gentle and soft-spoken, and he said he loved how grounded I was. We started dating, and a year later he moved into the bungalow with me. My parents seemed happy about it, at least on the surface. But even in those early days, there were tiny things that felt off. My dad, Richard, would walk around the house with his hands behind his back, inspecting corners like a landlord. "This porch light needs replacing," he'd say. "You know, we spent a lot of money maintaining this place over the years." My mom, Carol, would sigh heavily every time we mentioned making changes. "Just don't turn your grandparents' house into some cheap rental vibe, okay?" she'd say, with a little laugh that didn't feel like a joke. I brushed it off as normal parental fussing. I told myself, they're old-fashioned, that's all. But every time my dad said, "our house," instead of "your house," when he talked about the bungalow, something in my chest tightened for a second before I forced myself to ignore it. I didn't know then that those tiny words were the first warning signs that something was very wrong. The first big crack showed up at a family dinner about a year after I moved in. It was a Sunday, the usual roast chicken and mashed potatoes kind of night, the kind where my mom wanted everyone to pretend we were a perfectly normal family. Alex came with me, because my parents insisted they wanted to get to know him better. Tyler showed up late, as always, laughing and smelling like cologne and something a bit stronger. We were halfway through dinner when my mom looked at my plate, then at me, then at Alex. "So, when are you two finally going to make this official?" she asked, smiling too widely. I almost choked on my water. "We're not in a rush, Mom. We're comfortable for now." My dad snorted. "Comfortable? Living in our bungalow and paying barely anything in property tax because of the old assessment." Alex shifted uncomfortably next to me. "Dad," I said slowly, "it's not your bungalow anymore. Grandpa and Grandma left it to me, remember?" My dad put his fork down loudly. "I remember your grandparents leaving it to the family. You just happened to be the one whose name we used on some of the papers." The table went silent. Tyler looked up from his phone, eyes flicking between us like he'd just tuned into a show he didn't want to miss. My mom gave my dad a little warning look, then turned to me with that fake sweet tone she used when she wanted to insult me without sounding like she was insulting me. "Your father just means you should be grateful. You didn't put a dime into that place when it was falling apart. We did. We're letting you live there almost like a favor." I felt my face burn. Alex cleared his throat and tried to smooth things over. "Of course Lauren is grateful," he said softly. "She talks all the time about how thankful she is." My dad gave him a look that basically said, "Stay out of it, kid," then looked back at me. "You don't act very grateful," he said. "No rent, barely contributing when we help with repairs, and now you're talking about changing the kitchen like you own the place outright." My fork shook in my hand. "I do own the place," I said quietly. "At least, that's what you told me when you made me sign all those papers." My mom gave a light laugh. "Oh, Lauren, don't be dramatic. You always twist things in your head. You signed what the lawyer told us to sign. You don't even remember what it was." There it was. In front of everyone, she'd basically called me ungrateful and implied I was too clueless to understand my own house papers. Tyler smirked, looking down at his plate like he was enjoying the show. I wanted Alex to say more, to stand up and tell them to stop talking to me like I was a child. Instead, he just looked at me with that worried expression, like he was silently asking me not to start a fight. The rest of dinner felt like I was eating cardboard. My parents switched back to small talk as if they hadn't just stepped on my chest in the middle of the mashed potatoes. When we finally left and got into Alex's car, I could barely breathe. "You heard what they said," I told him, hugging my coat around myself even though the car heater was on. "They acted like the house is theirs. They said I just happened to sign things." "Lauren," he said carefully, "I think they're just old school. They probably still think of it as a family house." "That's not the same as filing things in their name," I shot back. "I know what they told me when I signed those papers. They said it was to put the deed in my name. That's what they said." He exhaled slowly, hands tight on the wheel. "I'm not saying you're wrong," he said. "I'm just saying, maybe they didn't mean it as harsh as it sounded." I looked out the window at the dark streets. The lights from the houses blurred as tears filled my eyes. From that night on, every time my dad said, "our bungalow," the word "our" sounded less like family and more like a warning that my name in that house didn't really belong to me at all. After that dinner, things slowly got worse. Not in huge explosions at first. More like a constant drip of little comments that started wearing me down. My parents dropped by the bungalow more often, usually without calling. They'd show up while I was still in my pajamas, or while I was on a work call, and walk in like they had a key to my life as well as my front door. "Just checking that everything's okay," my mom would say, peeking into rooms. "What are you doing with the attic?" my dad asked one morning, looking up at the hatch like it personally offended him. One Saturday, he brought a clipboard. "I talked to a guy I know," he said, standing in the kitchen while I made coffee. "We can refinance this place, get some cash out. Interest rates are good right now." I frowned. "Refinance my house?" I asked. "Why would we need to do that?" He waved a hand like I was being silly. "We're not getting any younger, Lauren. The family has some debts, your mother's medical bills, some things with Tyler. It's easier if we use this place as collateral for a new loan." My stomach dropped. "You want to put my grandparents' house up as collateral for your debts?" I asked. He gave me a hard look. "You talk like this house just fell from the sky into your lap. We maintained it. We dealt with all the paperwork when your grandparents got sick. You think any of that was free?" My mom, who had been quietly wiping the already clean counter, chimed in. "It's just some papers," she said. "The bank needs your signature as the occupant, that's all. We'll handle the rest. You barely need to look at it." That sentence, "you barely need to look at it," got stuck in my throat. My dad pulled some documents out of a folder and placed them on the table. A lot of small print. A lot of legal words. He pointed to the bottom of one page. "Sign here, here, and here," he said. "You can trust your own parents, can't you?" Alex was sitting at the table too, scrolling through his phone. He glanced at the papers, then at me, clearly not understanding the details either. "I mean, it's your call," he said, shrugging. "They've managed things so far, right?" I looked at the lines. At my dad's impatient face. At my mom's tight smile. Something screamed inside me not to pick up the pen. "I'm going to have someone look at this first," I said, pushing the papers back. I'm not signing anything today. My dad's jaw clenched. What, you think we're trying to trick you? He snapped. I didn't say that, I replied, my voice shaking even though I tried to sound steady. You didn't have to, he said. You just made it pretty clear you don't trust your own family. My mom sighed loudly. This is what we get after everything we've done, she said, pressing her hand to her chest like she was the victim in a soap opera. Tyler, who had just walked in at the tail end of the conversation, laughed. Yeah, Law, relax, he said. It's not like they're going to throw you out on the street. Their laughter echoed in my head long after they left. That night, when Alex went to bed, I stayed up and dug through the fireproof box where I kept my important documents. Birth certificate, car title, some old bank statements. Behind them, folded carefully in a plastic sleeve, were the papers from when my grandparents' house had been transferred after the funeral. I spread them out on the dining table. There was my name, Lauren Bennett, clear as day on a document titled Warranty Deed. But there was also another paper I didn't remember seeing before. An agreement that mentioned something like temporary transfer for estate planning purposes, with some language that made my head spin. On that one, my name was there, but so were my parents' names, under a line that said, co-owners for management. The date was from a few months after my grandparents passed, when I was still so numb with grief that I signed everything they put in front of me. I stared at the signatures. Mine. Mom's. Dad's. A tight feeling gripped my chest. I pulled out my phone, took pictures of every page, and emailed them to myself and to a backup email I barely used. Then I printed another copy at work the next day and hid it in a folder labeled Old Campaigns that I knew no one would bother to open. I didn't fully understand what any of it meant yet, but something in my gut told me I needed to keep those papers close. Just in case the laughing line from my brother, "It's not like they're going to throw you out on the street," ever stopped sounding like a joke. The more I hesitated about signing new documents, the more my parents' behavior changed. It was like a switch flipped. They stopped dropping by with small gifts and started dropping by with criticisms. "You still haven't fixed that broken fence," my dad would say, shaking his head. "This porch looks terrible, Lauren. If the neighbors complain, it comes back on us, you know." When I pointed out that the property taxes and utility bills were all in my name, they acted like I was being dramatic. "I can change all that with one phone call," my dad muttered once, not quite under his breath. At first, I tried talking to my own friends about it. My best friend Jenna met me for coffee one afternoon, and I poured everything out. She listened, frowning, stirring her latte slowly. "It's not normal," she said finally. "Parents wanting to refinance your house for their debts? That's not just old-fashioned. That's sketchy." I nodded, feeling a bit of relief. "I thought I was overreacting," I admitted. "Alex keeps telling me to give them the benefit of the doubt." Jenna made a face. "Alex is a good guy, but he hates conflict. He'd rather gaslight himself than admit your parents are being weird." We both laughed a little, but it wasn't really a funny laugh. A week later, after another tense argument with my parents about some insurance paperwork they wanted me to sign, I tried again to talk to Alex. We were in bed, the room dark except for the soft glow of his phone. "They're pushing harder," I whispered. "They keep saying things like, 'We'll handle it, just sign here.' And my dad said he can change everything with one phone call." "That's not normal, Alex." He put his phone down and turned toward me. "Lauren, you've been on edge about this house ever since you moved in," he said gently. "Maybe you just fixate on worst-case scenarios. Your parents are controlling, sure, but they're not monsters." "I'm not saying they're monsters," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm saying something feels wrong. Every time I ask a question, they act like I'm ungrateful or crazy." He sighed. "You know you have a tendency to take things too personally," he said. "Remember that time at work when your boss criticized a report and you thought he hated you?" I stared at him, my heart slowly sinking. "This isn't the same," I said softly. Maybe not, he said, but you have to admit, you sometimes create drama in your head before it even happens. There it was. The word they all kept circling around. Dramatic. Crazy. Too sensitive. When I confronted my parents again, this time asking directly why that co-owner paper existed if the house was supposed to be mine, my dad slammed his hand on the table. I am done with this paranoia, he shouted. We did what needed to be done for the estate. You barely understand any of it, yet you keep accusing us. My mom shook her head, her eyes shining with fake tears. I can't believe our own daughter thinks we're trying to steal from her, she sniffed. I raised a girl who doesn't trust us at all. Maybe we should have just given the house to Tyler instead. He's grateful. Later, I found out she'd called some relatives and told them I was becoming unstable and obsessed with legal papers. A cousin messaged me, asking if I was okay, and saying my mom sounded really worried about me. I started to notice other things too. My parents suddenly forgot to invite me to family events, then acted surprised when I found out. Oh, we thought you were too busy, my mom would say. Pictures of barbecues and birthday dinners with Tyler and his girlfriend would pop up on social media, and I'd realize I hadn't even been told. Even Jenna started getting distant with my parents. She told me once, every time I see them, they hint that you're not yourself lately, that you're fixating on the house. It's like they're trying to build a case that you're the problem. I felt more and more like I was being pushed into a corner. Every time I tried to push back, someone called me crazy, sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. Slowly, the people I thought would stand next to me in that corner started stepping away. One night, after a particularly nasty argument where my dad said, "If you don't want our help, don't come crying to us when everything falls apart," I sat in the dark living room alone. The house, which had once felt like mine, a gift from my grandparents, was starting to feel like a trap that other people were quietly wiring from the outside. I stared at the front door and had a sudden cold thought. If they wanted to, they really could throw me out. And by the way they were talking about papers and phone calls, I started to believe they might already be planning how. The morning everything collapsed started like any other, except that the sky outside my window was still black. I woke up to a loud, heavy knocking that rattled the front door. I squinted at my phone. 6:02 a.m. Alex rolled over and groaned. "Who the hell is that?" he mumbled. The knocking came again, firmer, followed by a deep male voice. "Sheriff's office," he called. "Anyone inside?" That sentence made my blood run cold. Alex and I scrambled out of bed. I pulled on the nearest t-shirt and sweatpants, my heart pounding. When I opened the door, there he was. A man in a uniform, wearing a jacket with a badge on the front, holding a folder and a clipboard. Behind him was another officer, standing by the walkway, looking down at a piece of paper. "Lauren Bennett?" the man with the clipboard asked. "Why, yes," I croaked. He nodded, his face tired but not unkind. "Ma'am, I have an eviction order for this address," he said. "Filed by the property owners. We're here to serve you notice and supervise the process." I blinked at him, the word eviction echoing in my skull like it was in a tunnel. "I think you have the wrong place," I said, forcing out a small laugh that sounded completely fake. "I own this house." He glanced at his papers. "The order lists Richard and Carol Bennett as the owners," he said. "They filed for eviction on the grounds that the occupant refuses to leave or comply with their agreement." My mouth went dry. "Richard and Carol are my parents," I said. "There must be some mistake." He gave me that look people give when they wish they didn't have to be the messenger. "I understand this is upsetting," he said. "But the paperwork is in order. You were supposed to have received previous notices." "No, I didn't," I whispered. "I never got anything. Nothing." Alex had come to the door by then, standing behind me, his hair messy, eyes wide. "What's going on?" he asked. The deputy cleared his throat. Sir, do you live here as well? Yeah, I'm her partner, Alex said, stepping forward. We pay the utilities, she pays the taxes. This is her house. The deputy shook his head slightly. According to the documents, the legal owners filed that the occupant was allowed temporary residence as a favor, but has become uncooperative and unstable, refusing to vacate or sign agreements, he read from the page. On that basis, a judge signed off on this eviction order. The word unstable jumped out at me like it was in neon letters. I didn't need to guess who had chosen that word. I could hear my mom's voice in my head. She twists everything in her head. She gets obsessed. I'm really worried about her. My hands started shaking. Can I see it? I asked. He handed me the papers. There it was. My parents' names. Their signatures. A description of me that made my stomach churn, increasingly irrational, refusing to honor verbal agreements, creating unnecessary conflict. At the bottom, a line that said they were exercising their rights as legal owners to regain control of their property. The deputy's voice felt far away as he explained that I had a limited number of hours to gather my things, that a lock change could be requested, that if I had any objections, I needed to take it up in court. Court. Which takes time. Time I clearly didn't have that morning. Alex read over my shoulder, his face going pale. Lauren, he whispered. Maybe we should call your parents. This has to be some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't come with a badge at 6 in the morning, I wanted to say, but my throat was too tight. I nodded numbly and went to grab my phone. My fingers felt like someone else's as I scrolled for my mom's contact. She picked up on the second ring, sounding surprisingly awake. Lauren, she said. Why are you calling so early? There's a deputy at my door, I said, my voice trembling. He says you and Dad filed an eviction order. What is this? What did you do? There was a pause on the line, then a soft sigh. Oh, honey, she said. I told your father we should talk to you first, but you've been so unreasonable about everything. We didn't know what else to do. Evict me, I shouted. From the house you promised was mine? You're raising your voice again, she said in that calm, condescending tone. This is exactly what we told the judge. You get emotional and twist everything. The house was always a family asset, not your personal toy. We let you live there as long as you cooperated. Cooperated. I repeated, my knees actually feeling weak. You mean as long as I signed whatever you pushed in front of me? Lauren, she said sharply. We are not going to argue about this over the phone. You've made it impossible to manage things normally. We had to protect ourselves. You can find another place to stay until you calm down and we can discuss a reasonable arrangement. Behind me, the deputy gently reminded me, Ma'am, we really need to start the process soon. Tears blurred my vision. Unbelievable, I whispered into the phone. You did this behind my back. We did what we had to do, my mom replied. Maybe this will finally make you realize you can't bite the hand that feeds you. The line went dead. For a second, everything went quiet, like someone had pressed mute on the world. Then the deputy's voice floated in again. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we need to move forward, he said quietly. We'll give you as much dignity and time as we can, but the order is active. Dignity. I almost laughed. How do you pack dignity into a box and carry it out to your car while the neighbors peek through their curtains at 6:30 in the morning? Alex and I rushed around, pulling clothes from hangers, grabbing important things, stuffing what we could into suitcases and trash bags. My hands kept shaking so badly I dropped things constantly. I tried to focus on documents, my laptop, some family photos, a box of items that had belonged to my grandparents. Every second felt like it was slipping away from me, just like my house. Outside, the second officer leaned against the patrol car, checking something on his phone, pretending not to see me wiping tears off my face as I carried boxes out. A couple of neighbors pretended to be walking their dogs, their eyes flicking between me and the patrol car, curiosity written all over their faces. At one point, Alex cornered one of the deputies and asked, "Is there anything we can do to stop this?" "Right now." The man shook his head. "This is just the enforcement," he said. "If there's something wrong with the order, you'll have to fight it through legal channels. I'm just here to do my job." By 9 in the morning, the bungalow looked like a stranger's house. My bookshelves were empty. The bed was stripped. The sunroom, where I used to drink coffee and imagine my future, was bare except for the dust outlines of furniture. When I stood at the front door for what I thought might be the last time, one of the deputies handed me a copy of the order in a plastic sleeve. "Make sure you keep this," he said. "Take it to a lawyer as soon as you can." A lawyer. Money. Time. 3 things my parents knew I didn't have much of. As I locked the car and climbed into the passenger seat, clutching the folder so tightly it crumpled, Alex started the engine and pulled away. I watched through the side mirror as the house shrank behind us, the big maple tree swaying gently like it had no idea anything was wrong. I thought I'd hit rock bottom the moment the deputy said the word, eviction. But as we drove toward an uncertain future, with half my life in the trunk and my parents' signatures on a paper that called me unstable, I realized something even worse. They hadn't just taken my house. They'd taken the version of me that still believed family would never be the ones to put me out on the street. And I had no idea yet that this was only the beginning of the fall. And that the papers I'd taken pictures of in my dining room late at night would be the lifeline I'd cling to when I finally decided to fight back. My parents secretly put their names on my grandparents' bungalow, used that to file an eviction order, and at 6 in the morning a deputy sheriff put me out of what I thought was my own house. I left with boxes in the car, my heart shattered, and only some photographed documents as my last lifeline. The first night after the eviction, I slept on Jenna's couch. If you can even call it sleep. Her apartment was small, just a 1-bedroom above a laundromat that hummed all night. Alex and I had dragged my boxes up the narrow stairs, my arms burning, my brain completely numb. I sat on the edge of her couch while she made instant noodles in the tiny kitchen, and everything felt like it was happening to somebody else. Jenna brought me a bowl and sat on the coffee table across from me. "You need to eat," she said. I stared at the noodles for a while before managing a few bites. Alex sat in the armchair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He looked more like a guilty bystander than a partner. "I still can't believe they did that," he said quietly. "Your parents. An actual eviction order." "Believe it," I said, my voice flat. "They used the word unstable in the court documents. They told a judge I'm irrational and won't cooperate." Jenna frowned deeply. "That word isn't random," she said. "They've been planting that idea for months. Every time they told people you were fixating or getting obsessed, they were building a story." I swallowed hard. "What am I supposed to do now?" I whispered. "I don't have savings for a lawyer. I don't even have my own bed right now." Jenna put her bowl down and leaned forward. "There's a legal aid clinic downtown," she said. "They helped my cousin when she had that landlord issue. It's income-based, but you're not exactly rich, Laure. They might at least tell you if you have a case." "I don't want to drag my parents to court," I protested weakly. She looked at me like I'd just said I didn't want to breathe. "They dragged you to court first," she said. "You're already in a legal case whether you like it or not. You just weren't invited to the part where they made up the story." Alex nodded slowly. "She's right," he said. "We should at least talk to someone. Show them the deed papers you photographed. That co-owner thing. The eviction order." I stared at both of them, feeling like I was standing at the edge of some massive cliff. On one side, do nothing and accept that I'd lost my grandparents' house forever. On the other side, jump into a world of lawyers and courtrooms and admit that my parents weren't just strict or old-fashioned. They were willing to throw me out and call me unstable to protect themselves. "Okay," I whispered finally. "I'll go. I'll talk to someone." That night, while Jenna put fresh sheets on the couch and Alex went to pick up a few more boxes from his friend's garage, I lay staring at the ceiling. The humming of the laundromat below blended with the buzzing in my ears. I remembered the night I'd taken pictures of the original deed, how a voice in my gut had screamed at me to keep evidence. I thought about my grandparents, how my grandfather used to stand under the maple tree with a cup of coffee, telling me that one day I'd have my own life there. "I'm so sorry," I whispered into the dark, not even sure who I was apologizing to. To them, for not protecting their gift sooner. To myself, for not trusting my own instincts. By the time dawn started to lighten the thin curtains in Jenna's living room, I'd made a decision. If my parents were willing to drag me into court without warning, then I was done playing the obedient daughter who swallowed everything in silence. I was going to walk into that legal aid clinic and tell a stranger everything my own family had done to me. And if there was even a tiny chance to fight back, I was going to grab it with both hands. 2 days later, I walked into the legal aid clinic with a folder so stuffed that the edges were starting to curl. Jenna came with me, holding my hand until we got to the front desk. The waiting area was simple. Plastic chairs, a water cooler, a bulletin board covered with flyers about tenants' rights and debt counseling. A tired-looking woman at the desk took my name and income info, then handed me a clipboard with forms. It felt surreal, checking the box next to eviction, under reason for seeking help. Like I was admitting something shameful. After what felt like an hour, a man in his late 40s stepped into the waiting room. He wore a simple dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and glasses that he kept pushing up his nose. "Lauren Bennett," he called. I stood up. "That's me." He smiled faintly. "I'm Daniel Cole," he said. "I'm one of the attorneys here. Come on back. You can bring your friend if you'd like." Jenna squeezed my shoulder. "I'll be right here," she said. I nodded and followed him down a narrow hallway into a small office with stacks of files everywhere. He closed the door and gestured to a chair. "So," he said, sitting down across from me, "tell me what's going on. Start from the beginning, not just the deputy at your door." It all poured out of me. The grandparents' house. The promise that it was mine. The weird, co-owner paper I barely remembered signing. The refinance conversations. The constant pressure to sign new documents. The eviction at 6 in the morning, the word unstable in the court filing. He didn't interrupt much. He just listened, occasionally jotting something down. At the end, I slid the folder across the desk to him with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "These are copies of everything I have," I said. "Pictures of the original deed from after my grandparents died. The weird estate planning paper. The eviction order. Texts from my mom. Emails. I don't even know what any of it really means." He opened the folder and started scanning the pages. As he read, his eyebrows slowly climbed higher. "This warranty deed," he said, tapping one page, "shows the property being transferred to you from your grandparents, yes. That would generally mean you became the legal owner at that point." "Then what is that other paper?" I asked. "The one where my parents' names show up as co-owners?" He pulled out the second document, the one with the confusing wording. He read it carefully, lips moving a little as he worked through the clauses. "This isn't a regular co-owner deed," he said after a minute. "It's more like a management agreement. It says your parents can manage and make decisions regarding the property for a limited duration to resolve estate matters. It doesn't actually transfer full ownership to them. And..." He flipped to the second page and pointed at a paragraph. "And it has an end date. This was meant to last until certain estate debts were settled or for 5 years, whichever came first." I leaned forward. "That was more than 5 years ago," I said slowly. He nodded. "Exactly," he said. "So whatever management power they had would have expired by now, unless there's another document I'm not seeing." He went back to the eviction order. My parents' sworn statements. The claim that they were the rightful owners. The description of me as unstable and uncooperative. The suggestion that I'd been allowed to live there as an act of kindness. He rubbed his forehead. Did you have a lawyer when this eviction was filed? He asked. I laughed weakly. No, I said. I didn't even know about it until the deputy showed up. He exhaled slowly. Okay, he said, more to himself than to me. Okay. Here's what I'm seeing. Your parents used an expired management document and misrepresented themselves as sole owners to the court. They also described you in a way that would justify an emergency eviction. The judge probably signed off thinking you were some unstable tenant refusing to leave your landlord's house. But I'm not, I said, my voice cracking. This is my grandparents' house. They told me it was mine. I've been paying taxes and utilities. I've been living there for years. I know, he said softly. And we might be able to prove that. The words "might be able to prove that" hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the chair. Are you saying I have a case? I asked. I'm saying we have several angles, he replied. Number 1. Challenging the eviction as improperly granted based on misrepresentation. Number 2. Asserting your ownership rights under the original deed. Number 3. Potential damages for wrongful eviction. He paused, then added, but I need you to understand, this isn't going to be quick or pretty. This means filing motions, maybe standing in front of a judge and saying your parents lied. It means them fighting back, probably saying worse things about you. Are you ready for that? I thought about the deputy's knock at 6 a.m. About my mom saying I was biting the hand that feeds me. About my dad's voice calling me paranoid, ungrateful, dramatic. I think I hit the not pretty part when I watched strangers escort me out of my own house, I said quietly. So yes. If there's even a chance, I want to fight. He nodded once. Then we start by filing a motion to set aside the eviction and a petition to quiet title. Basically, asking the court to officially recognize you as the owner, he said. We'll need more evidence. Any texts or emails where they admit the house is yours. Any witnesses who heard them say it. Any proof you've been the one paying property taxes. I blinked. I have some emails from my mom where she wrote, "Your house," I said slowly. And my cousin Megan once joked at dinner that I was the only one responsible enough to get a whole house. My parents didn't correct her. Get me all of it, he said. Screen capture the messages, print records of tax payments, bank statements if you can. And, this might sound strange, but if you have any voicemails from them, don't delete anything. I left the clinic an hour later with a list of things to gather and a business card with Daniel Cole, ESQ, printed on it. For the first time since the eviction, my steps felt a little less heavy. Outside, Jenna was waiting, pacing near the door. When she saw my face, she rushed over. Well, she asked. What did he say? He said I'm not crazy, I replied, half laughing, half crying. He said we might be able to prove the house is legally mine and that the eviction was wrong. Jenna let out a loud breath and pulled me into a tight hug. Good, she said into my hair. Good. Let them choke on their own lies in front of a judge for once. As she held me, I realized something quietly powerful. My parents had tried to convince everyone I was unstable. But in this little office, with a lawyer flipping through actual documents, the story looked very different. The problem wasn't that I was crazy. The problem was that I'd finally stopped agreeing to live in a version of reality they had written for me. The weeks that followed were the hardest and most tiring of my life, but in a different way than before. This time, the exhaustion came with a sense of purpose. I moved into a small studio apartment above a bakery. The rent was ridiculous compared to what I'd paid in utilities at the bungalow, but the landlord, an older woman named Mrs. Wilson, gave me a slight discount when I told her I'd been evicted and was fighting it in court. Some families are worse than strangers, she said with a sad smile. Keep your documents, dear. Alex stayed with me at first, sleeping on a mattress on the floor because the space was too small for our old bed. But as the court stuff started to heat up, so did our problems. He hated the calls with the lawyer. He hated the idea of going to court against my parents. He hated the thought of being pulled into something messy. I just want my life back, he muttered one night when I was going through printed bank statements, highlighting all the property tax payments I'd made. I didn't sign up for a war with your family. I didn't either, I snapped back. The difference is, they started the war with me. You can walk away if you want, Alex. I'm the one whose name is all over these papers. He went quiet after that, and over the next few days, I could feel him pulling away emotionally. Less eye contact. More nights out with the guys. More vague promises that he'd be there for me, but not much actual effort. One evening he came home late, sat on the edge of the mattress, and said, "I think I need a break from all of this." All of what? I asked, even though I already knew. This whole situation, he said. The tiny apartment, the court stuff, your parents' drama. It's too much for me. I feel like I can't breathe. My chest tightened, but there weren't many tears left in me by then. So what are you saying? I asked. He swallowed. I'm going to stay at my brother's for a while, he said. Just until things calm down. I let out a humorless laugh. Things aren't going to calm down for a long time, Alex, I said. This is a fight. Either you're in it with me or you're not. He looked away. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I just can't do this. The next day, he moved his things out. I watched from the window as he loaded his boxes into his car and didn't come back up for a proper goodbye. He just texted, "I hope everything works out for you. Take care of yourself." It hurt, of course it did. But there was also a strange clarity in it. My parents had taken my house. Now, in a way, I was losing my partner too. What I had left were the people who stayed. Jenna, who came over with takeout and helped me organize paperwork. Mrs. Wilson, who slid fresh bread under my door sometimes. And Daniel, who called regularly with updates and instructions. Your parents' attorney responded, he told me one afternoon. They're insisting they're the rightful owners and that you were just given a temporary place to live, because you weren't stable enough to manage assets. I almost dropped my phone. They said I wasn't what? They're leaning hard into that narrative, he said. So I want to do two things. One, get a copy of your medical and mental health records, if you're comfortable with that, to show you've never been diagnosed with anything like they're implying. Two, gather every bit of evidence we have that they publicly referred to the bungalow as your house over the years. Like emails and texts. I asked. Yes, he said. And social media posts, if you have them. Did anyone ever post a picture of you there with captions like, Lauren's new place, or Lauren's housewarming? I thought back to the early days, the housewarming night when my cousin Megan had posted a photo of us on the porch with the caption, "So proud of you for getting your own place, Laure." There had been a comment from my mom under it, "She deserves her grandparents' house after all the stress she carried for this family." A chill ran through me. I think I have exactly what you're asking for, I said. We spent hours compiling everything. Screenshots, printouts, tax records, utility bills in my name. Even an old voice note my dad had left me once, saying, "Hey, make sure someone's at your place when the plumber comes. He'll be there around noon." It was like I was assembling a puzzle that showed two very different versions of my parents. The public version, the one they showed relatives and friends. Proud parents who gave their responsible daughter a house. And the legal version, the one they told the court. Generous owners being taken advantage of by an unstable, ungrateful child. Seeing both side by side made my stomach twist, but it also did something else. It made me angry in a way that felt clean and sharp for the first time. Not the messy, self-blaming anger I used to turn inward. A focused anger that knew exactly where it belonged. By the time our first big court date came around, I was exhausted but ready. It wasn't a full trial yet, more like a hearing to address the motion to set aside the eviction and the question of who had the stronger claim to the bungalow. The courthouse smelled faintly of cleaning products and paper. Jenna came with me, dressed in a simple blouse and dark jeans, because she refused to let me walk in alone. Daniel met us at the entrance, carrying a briefcase that looked like it held my entire life in it. "Remember," he said as we went through security, "this isn't about you proving you're a perfect human being. It's about showing the judge the paper trail and the pattern. Let the documents speak. When you're asked questions, just tell the truth. Don't try to guess what anyone wants to hear." I nodded, adjusting the collar of my one decent blazer. My legs felt like they were made of jelly. We walked into the small courtroom. It looked nothing like the dramatic ones in TV shows. Just wooden benches, a raised platform for the judge, 2 tables for the opposing sides. My parents were already there, sitting with their lawyer, a man in an expensive suit with perfect hair. My dad wore his best jacket, holding himself stiffly upright, his jaw clenched. My mom had on a light-colored blouse and a string of pearls I'd never seen before, her expression carefully arranged into worried sadness. When my mom saw me, she actually had the nerve to give me a little nod, like we were just bumping into each other at the grocery store. Tyler wasn't there. Part of me was relieved. Part of me wondered what they'd told him. We sat at the other table. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, but I kept mine on the judge's bench, trying not to shake. After a few minutes, the clerk announced, "All rise," and Judge Martinez stepped in. She was a woman in her 50s with calm eyes and a no-nonsense voice. We all sat after she did. The hearing started with the basics. Case number. Names. The fact that there had already been an eviction carried out. Then the judge looked from one table to the other. "Ms. Bennett," she said, turning to me, "you're asking the court to set aside the eviction and to recognize you as the rightful owner of the property. Is that correct?" I swallowed and nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "My grandparents left the house to me. My parents used an old document and lies about my mental state to evict me." My mother shifted in her seat and looked down at her hands. My father stared straight ahead. The judge nodded and turned to the other table. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," she said, "through your counsel, you've asserted that the property is yours and that your daughter was allowed to live there as a favor, but became uncooperative. Is that your position?" Their lawyer stood up. "Yes, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "My clients have always owned and maintained the property. Their daughter was allowed to live there rent-free under an informal family arrangement. When her behavior became erratic and she refused reasonable requests, my clients had no choice but to seek legal eviction." Erratic. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. Daniel stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "we'd like to start by introducing the original warranty deed transferring the property from the grandparents to Ms. Lauren Bennett, and the subsequent management agreement that had a clear expiration date. We'd also like to present evidence that the eviction order was obtained based on misrepresentation of ownership and of Ms. Bennett's mental state." The judge held out her hand. "Let me see the documents," she said. Daniel walked them up to her. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint rustle of paper as she read. She studied the warranty deed first. Then the management agreement. Her eyebrows lifted slightly at the expiration clause. "How long ago did this agreement expire?" she asked. "More than 5 years ago, Your Honor," Daniel answered. "At the time of the eviction, it was no longer in force. Yet the parents presented themselves to the court as sole owners." The opposing lawyer cleared his throat. "If I may, Your Honor." "Shortly," she said, holding up a hand. She went back to the papers, then opened the eviction file from her own bench. "According to this affidavit," she read, "the parents state they are the long-term owners of the property and that their daughter was permitted to stay as an act of grace. They describe her as increasingly unstable and uncooperative, and say she refuses to vacate property that does not legally belong to her." Hearing it read out loud felt like being punched in the stomach. My ears rang. The judge looked up, her eyes landing on my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," she said, her tone still even but sharper now. "Were you aware when you signed this affidavit that this management agreement had already expired?" My dad cleared his throat. "We thought it was still in effect," he said. "The property has always been in our family. We handled all of the bills when her grandparents were alive. We assumed. That wasn't my question, the judge interrupted. I asked if you were aware this specific document, which you attached as justification, contained an expiration clause that had already passed. My mom spoke up, her voice trembling just enough to look sympathetic. We're not lawyers, Your Honor, she said. We trusted that the papers we had were correct. We just wanted to protect ourselves. Our daughter has been very emotional, very difficult to communicate with lately. We were scared she might make bad decisions about the house. There it was again. The emotional daughter card. Daniel stepped forward slightly. Your Honor, may we also present social media posts and messages illustrating how Mr. and Mrs. Bennett described this property in the years before the eviction? Go ahead, she said. He brought another set of documents to her. At the top was a printed screenshot, my cousin Megan's post on the porch of the bungalow, captioned, "So proud of you for getting your own place, Laure." Under it, my mom's comment, "She deserves her grandparents' house after everything she did for this family." The judge read it, then flipped to the next page. Screenshot of an email from my mom, subject line, "Your house," with the body saying, "We'll come by your house on Sunday to help with the garage." Another page, a group text where my dad had written, "Lauren's place is big enough. We'll do Thanksgiving at her house this year." Another, tax receipts in my name. Utility bills. A note from a contractor, per Lauren's request for work at her property. The judge laid the stack down and looked from my parents to me. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "have you ever been diagnosed with any mental health condition that would interfere with your ability to manage property?" "No, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady for the first time all morning. I submitted my medical records to show that. The only people who have ever called me unstable are sitting at that table. There was a faint murmur from the benches behind us. I didn't look back to see who was there. Daniel added, "We have also submitted records showing that Ms. Bennett has consistently held employment and paid the property taxes and utilities in her name for several years." The judge turned back to my parents' lawyer. "Counselor," she said, "do you wish to respond?" He stood, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, families often use informal language. Saying your house doesn't necessarily indicate ownership in a legal sense," he said. "My clients were simply trying to help their daughter, who, as you can see, has a tendency to escalate situations emotionally." I felt my hands clench into fists. Before I could react, Daniel spoke again. "With respect, Your Honor, this isn't just about informal language," he said. "This is about a pattern. For years, they publicly framed the property as a gift to their responsible daughter. Then, when she refused to sign new documents that would allow them to leverage the property for their debts, they switched narratives, calling her unstable and claiming she had no rights. They obtained an eviction by painting her as a dangerous tenant in a house she legally owns." The judge leaned back in her chair, looking thoughtful. For a moment, the whole room felt like it was holding its breath. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," she said finally, her gaze settling on them again. "I'm going to ask you a very direct question. Did you ever tell your daughter plainly that the house did not belong to her?" My parents looked at each other. My mom opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "We always told her it was part of the family. That we would manage it together. We never meant to hurt her." "That's not what I asked," Judge Martinez said calmly. "Did you, at any point before filing this eviction, clearly inform her that you considered her merely a temporary occupant rather than an owner?" Silence. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom stared at her hands. The judge nodded slowly, as if their non-answer was an answer. She shuffled through the documents once more, then looked at me. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "would you mind coming up here for a moment? I'd like to ask you a few questions directly." My heart pounded, but I nodded and walked up to the witness stand. The clerk swore me in. I sat down, hands folded tightly in my lap. "Ms. Bennett," the judge said, "in your own words, what do you believe your grandparents intended when they signed this deed to you?" I took a deep breath. They always said the house would be mine one day, I said. They told me I'd worked so hard, helped them so much when they were sick. They said they wanted me to have a safe place to build my life. When I signed the papers after they passed, my parents told me, "This is to put the house in your name." I believed them. The judge nodded. "And when your parents later asked you to sign refinancing documents?" I felt pressured, I said. They told me I didn't need to read everything. That I barely needed to look at it. When I refused and said I wanted to have someone check them first, everything changed. They started calling me paranoid, ungrateful. They told relatives I was unstable and obsessed. Then one morning a deputy was at my door with an eviction order that said I didn't belong in my own house. My voice cracked on the last word, but I forced myself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. "Thank you," the judge said softly. "You can return to your seat." As I walked back to the table, my parents avoided my eyes. For once, they looked smaller than I felt. The judge took a few minutes to look over everything again. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "Here is what I'm going to do," she said. "First, the court finds that the eviction order was granted based on incomplete and misleading information regarding ownership and the occupant's mental state. That order is hereby set aside." It took me a second to process her words. Set aside. The eviction, undone. "Second," she continued, "the court recognizes that there is substantial evidence supporting Ms. Bennett's claim to ownership, including the original deed and the expiration of the management agreement. While there may be additional proceedings needed to fully quiet title, for the purposes of possession, the court is recognizing Ms. Bennett as the rightful occupant and manager of the property." I heard Jenna suck in a breath behind me. "In plain terms," the judge said, looking at all of us now, "Ms. Bennett is to be restored to possession of the bungalow. Any attempt to interfere with her occupancy or to represent the property as solely belonging to Mr. and Mrs. Bennett without full disclosure of these documents will be viewed very seriously by this court." My mom went completely pale. My dad's hands clenched on the edge of the table. "Furthermore," the judge added, "I am referring this matter to a separate division to review whether there was any intentional misrepresentation in the original filings. I'm not making a criminal determination today, but I am not comfortable with the way this eviction was obtained." The opposing lawyer started to protest. "Your Honor, my clients. Your clients signed sworn statements," she said sharply. "If they did so without fully understanding the documents they attached, that is careless. If they did so knowing those documents were no longer valid, that is something else entirely. Either way, it will be looked at." She turned to my parents directly. "You may have had genuine concerns about family finances or your daughter's decisions," she said, her tone cooling but not cruel. "But the way you handled those concerns, by secretly going to court, painting her as unstable, and having her removed from her home at 6 in the morning, was deeply inappropriate." My mother's lower lip trembled. "I didn't want it to happen like that," she whispered. We didn't know what else to do. She wouldn't sign the papers." The judge's expression didn't soften. "Not wanting to be questioned is not a legal reason to deceive the court," she said. "If you truly believed you were the owners, you could have pursued a declaratory judgment with full disclosure. You chose eviction instead. There are consequences to that choice." She looked back at our table. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "you and your attorney will receive written orders outlining the steps to restore your possession. You are also entitled to seek damages for the wrongful eviction if you choose to pursue that route. For now, I suggest you change the locks and keep your documents in a safe place." My throat tightened. "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed to say. When the hearing ended and the clerk called the next case, I turned slightly and caught a glimpse of my parents. My dad's face was red, his jaw working like he was grinding his teeth. My mom was staring at the table, tears streaming down her cheeks, but there was something in her eyes that looked more like anger than regret. Our eyes met for a split second. In that moment, it felt like there was an invisible line on the floor between us. On one side, the parents who used the word unstable to take my house. On the other, the daughter who finally had a judge say out loud that what they did was wrong. 4 years, they'd held the power of being the ones who knew better, the ones who managed everything. Now, for the first time, that power had slipped. And they looked absolutely terrified of what it meant. I wish I could say that everything turned into a perfect happy ending after that hearing, but life doesn't work like that. It was more like a long, slow exhale after years of holding my breath. It took another few weeks to get the official papers, arrange with the sheriff's office to supervise my return, and coordinate with a locksmith. They offered to send officers with me in case my parents tried something, but my parents stayed away that day. Jenna came with me. So did Daniel, just to make sure everything went smoothly. When I stepped out of the car in front of the bungalow again, the maple tree was still there, leaves rustling softly. The house looked the same, but I didn't. I walked up to the front door with a new set of keys in my hand. The locksmith had already changed the locks and given me a nod. "This is all you now," he said, handing them over. I turned the key slowly. The click felt like closing one door and opening another at the same time. Inside, the rooms were mostly as I'd left them, just a bit dustier. My parents hadn't moved anything in. Maybe they'd been too sure of themselves. Maybe they'd planned to remodel once the court fully confirmed them as owners. Jenna twirled around in the living room. "Okay, first order of business," she said. "You need to sage this place. Or at least open the windows and let all the toxic parent energy out." We laughed, maybe a little too loudly, but it felt good. Cathartic. Over the next months, I slowly rebuilt my life in that bungalow. I repainted the bedroom myself, choosing a color I liked without asking anyone's opinion. I got a modest raise at work and started a small emergency fund, even if it grew only a little each month. I hired a therapist and went once a week, unpacking not just the eviction, but years of being told I was dramatic, ungrateful, too much. Alex texted a few times, asking how the case went. I told him the basics, and he replied with a, "Wow, that's great, I'm happy for you." He hinted once that we should catch up, maybe grab coffee. But after everything, I realized I didn't want a partner who stepped away when things got hard. I didn't respond to that last message, and he never followed up. My relationship with my parents changed. They didn't apologize. They didn't show up at my door begging for forgiveness. What they did was send a short email, written by their lawyer, saying they would respect the court's decision and no longer interfere with the property. They stopped inviting me to family events completely. Word trickled back through cousins that my parents were telling people the whole situation got blown out of proportion, and that I had overreacted by involving lawyers. But the difference now was that I didn't feel the need to chase them down and prove my side to everyone. If relatives asked what happened, I simply said, "The court saw the documents and put me back in my house." That's all I'm going to say. The rest was up to them to interpret. I was done trying to manage everyone else's perception. As for Tyler, I heard through the grapevine that the debts my parents had been so desperate to cover didn't magically disappear. Without being able to touch my bungalow, they had to sell their own house and downsize to a smaller place on the edge of town. Tyler ended up taking on a job he hated to help make ends meet. Was I happy about their hardship? No, not exactly. But I also couldn't ignore the simple truth. They had tried to solve their problems by taking away the one stable thing in my life. When that failed, they finally had to face their own mess instead of dumping it on me. Sometimes, when I sat in the sunroom with a mug of tea, I'd look out at the yard and imagine my grandparents somewhere, watching. "I got it back," I'd murmur. "I know it's just 4 walls and a roof, but it was never just that, was it?" It wasn't just a house. It was a line in the sand. A physical, legal boundary that said, "This is mine. This is where your control stops. This is where I start making my own decisions." Now, when I think about everything I went through, the eviction at 6 in the morning isn't the only moment that sticks with me. Another equally important one is sitting in that courtroom, listening to the judge say my parents were wrong, and realizing that the little voice in my gut had been right all along. From everything I went through, I learned that you should never ignore that uneasy feeling when people who love you start asking you to sign things without reading them and tell you not to ask questions. I also learned that blood ties don't give anyone the right to rewrite reality and call you crazy when you don't play along. If you're in a situation like mine, please remember, protecting yourself isn't being ungrateful. It's the most basic form of self-respect. If you've ever gone through something similar or you want to share your own story, write it in the comments below. Don't forget to share this story with your friends, like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories.